Oi! Oi! Yeah, down there. Down there, it's me. It's me. That's it. It's me. You smartwatch. Super smartwatch.
What do you mean by smartwatch?
Like, I do fancy things, like give you your heart rate while you're running. I will give you pace. I also do the GPS tracking, all the good stuff.
Yeah, I guess that is pretty smart.
Yeah, but I also do really smart stuff, like I could give you your VO2 Max.
What do you mean? What, you mean you can calculate the amount of oxygen I take in and breathe out that's usually done in a lab just as a watch?
Well, no, it's an educated guess, isn't it? Cause I'm a smartwatch. Forget it anyway, forget it. I could also do your sleep.
Okay, I can see how that would be handy. Like, you mean you can tell me when I'm in REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, like stuff like that?
Well, no, I just know when you stop moving. No need to get all technical on me.
Right, yeah, I mean, barely seems any point really.
Alright, what about heart rate zones?
Alright, now, heart rate zones, that's interesting because I've used you before and it tends to tell me that all of my easy runs are in zone 3, so what calculations are you using for the heart rate zones?
Magic.
Magic?
Yeah, like, like witchcraft and sorcery and voodoos.
Okay, so you don't really know my zones?
No.
Alright, what else you got, WizKid?
Okay, at least I can tell you whether your session that you have done is a good training effect or a bad training effect on you.
Yeah, but hold up. Sometimes I've had like really good sessions, but base sessions, and sometimes in a recovery week, and I go back and the watch tells me that it's had little to no impact on my fitness or it's been like a pointless session, and that's just felt demotivating. What you got to say about that?
What you saying? My brother is calling me down for dinner. We're having chicken, so I got to go. I'll catch up with you later, okay? Bye.
That doesn't sound too smart. But I guess the thing about smart watches, smart apps, stuff like that is the phenomenal amount of data they give you. It's about learning how to interpret that for yourself rather than letting the app or the watch or whatever interpret it for you in a way that can be totally useful for you, and not just useful, but motivating. So let's talk about some of the functionality that we have available to us on watches and apps, and let's cut through how to use it in a useful way for you that's going to help your training, not hinder you or demotivate. But to illustrate the bread and butter, the stuff that I think is the most important with these types of watches and apps, we need to get ourselves out. Let's just clear one thing up from the get-go. I love my watch. I love what it does for me. I love the data that it gives me. I'm a huge fan. Couldn't live without it. That's not my point for this video. My point is learning what data you can take at face value and what data you have to take with a pinch of salt and learn how to actually interpret that data. So let's talk about the face value stuff. So hopefully you can see there, although I've stopped moving, you can see my heart rate, the distance that I've just run, I've just started the run, and the timer. And you will, once I start moving, should flick up. There you go. You'll see the pace. Now, that data doesn't need interpretation. It's telling you how fast you're running, how long you've been running for, what your heart rate is whilst you're running, and the distance that you're running. I mean, that doesn't need interpretation, and that's brilliant. That's the only data I use when I'm out and about. And the only part of that data really that needs interpretation is if you are training in zones, you're going to need to know your accurate heart rate zones. So I don't actually have the zones up on my screen because I already know them, but I have my heart rate displaying and then I know where I need to be. But we're going to talk about zones a little bit later and how to properly calculate them.
I mean, there is a lot of other data that is readily available for you when you're running, but to be honest with you, I find it kind of bombards the senses. It's not really needed on a day-to-day basis. Those are the 4 that I find. Some people play around with average pace over kilometres or things like that, but these are not really open to interpretation. They're just the data that you can use while you're out there, and I find that the pure sense. It's more what you're looking at when you get back from your runs, or what your watch tells you about other parts of your day that's not training. That's the stuff that needs a pinch of salt. So let's head back to the studio, where we're going to talk about probably 4 or 5 of the most frequently asked questions about information or data that our watch or apps give us that I think you can't take at face value, but with just a little bit of information, with a little bit of learning, you can work out how to interpret that for yourself. It's nothing mind-blowing, nothing too technical, but I just want to break down the barriers so that you can look at that information through eyes where you kind of know a little bit more about it than just taking it at face value. Why do I always walk up a hill at the end?
Okay, let's tackle some of the most frequently asked questions or most raised concerns about smartwatches, apps, sleep tracking, things like that. And where I want to start is one of the simpler ones, and that is heart rate zones. Now, I've had a look at Garmin in particular, and I can't work out how they work out your heart rate zone. It isn't the same way that I use heart rate zones, and it certainly isn't the same way that the majority of us use our heart rate zones. Now, I use Joe Friel's heart rate zone calculator, which is one of the more commonly used sets of heart rate zones. But what I've found often is that people who I'm coaching, or just people on YouTube that watch, they get in touch with me and they say, look, I'm running easy, I'm supposed to be running in zone 2, but everything is in zone 3. But if I look back at my runs, and I look back at my easy runs, which I know are my zone 2 because I've calculated it properly, Garmin tells me that I'm in zone 3 for a lot of it. So do not, whatever you do, use the preset zones on your Garmin watch or your Polar watch or Sunto. My advice is this: the only real way of knowing your zones is testing your zones. And unfortunately for you, it's not a pleasant experience because it involves an all-out 5K to get your proper heart rate zones. Now, I've linked a video up here of how you calculate your heart rate zones because I'm not going to go into it all now, but the essence of it is that you can use the information you get from it has to be a flat 5K because hills tend to skew the data, but a hard 5K will do the job for you and you'll be able to calculate your zones from there. But as I say, the video I've linked will talk you through it in much more detail. That's the first thing, don't trust the Garmin calculated zones. Now, the next thing I want to touch on is VO2 Max, because your watch gives you a VO2 Max, and yes, it's been proven to be reasonably accurate, but is reasonably accurate good enough? I had this conversation with a number of coaches, and some coaches swear by VO2 Max. I certainly don't. I think it's good enough to know that you've got one, and some sessions that you can use to train your VO2 Max. And again, I'll link a video up here about VO2 Max. But it is a best guess. You cannot get a fully accurate VO2 Max on a watch because it's done in a laboratory and it analyses your oxygen in and your oxygen out. A watch simply can't do that. So rather than put your stock in what your watch says your VO2 Max is, just relax, chill, know you've got one, and train on. It's all good. You don't need to know what your VO2 Max is. I've gone for 15 years without knowing mine, and I've done pretty well myself, and I'm alright with it. And this is one of the big ones. What about sleep? Because there are now even rings, the Oura Ring, there is the Whoop Band, there is the Garmin watch tracked sleep, but I had a chat with Dr. Neil Stanley, and if you listen to the Fitness Freaks podcast, then you will know he's really enlightening. He's a sleep expert of over 39 years, and he basically just blew that out of the water. He has done reviews, scientific reviews, papers. He's reviewed so many other papers as well. He's one of the leading experts on technology and how it can actually track your sleep, like the Oura Ring. And he says, get this, that the Oura Ring, that a watch, that any sleep tracking app is able to track your sleep as effectively as your guess. So how you felt you slept, let's say you guessed that maybe you were awake for 45 minutes of the night, was actually more accurate than what the Oura Ring or a watch or any technology has been able to get to. So chill out. Don't worry about sleep apps. In fact, when I was using my watch, I was getting more anxious because it was telling me I wasn't getting the deep sleep I thought I wanted. throw it out the window. It really just tracks when you stop moving and when you are moving. So it can't tell you when you're definitively in REM sleep, deep sleep, all of that. And that has been scientifically proven by a sleep expert of 39 years experience. And probably the last one I want to touch on is this whole training effect that the watch can tell you, the app can tell you the training effect of each of your individual sessions. Well, it's just in isolation. It might look at your recovery week easy session and it might say it has limited training benefit. But we all know that a recovery week is crucial. We all know that taking down the volume and intensity sometimes is crucial. And it can actually be demotivating reading that it's saying that it's not a good effect when you know that it is, when you know that it's crucial. Even when you do short, sharp training sessions, sometimes it tells you that the training effect is not very good. Well, again, that's rubbish. Don't leave it for a watch to tell you whether your training was good or bad. That's just a recipe for disaster. What I would suggest is just having faith in the process that you're going through the training plan or being coached or whatever, and don't put any stock in what the watch says. And that's not slamming the watch, and it's not slamming an app. I'm just saying that it is trying its best to give you information, and it's almost like that whole thing about where fire came from in the early days. People didn't understand fire, they didn't know where it came from, so they thought it came from above or whatever, and over time, science has overridden that, and it's, friction, and this is fire, whatever. And this is the same with these things. The watches are trying to help. They're really trying to give you good information, but a lot of the information they give are guesses to try and help you in the right direction. And what I'm trying to do is give you the knowledge to override the guessing so that you can get more pure knowledge, like to get your heart rate zones correct, to not worry too much about sleep because these are no good for that, to know when a session is detraining you or training you and not to be demotivated by it. That's the whole point of this video, tutorial, channel, is filling in the gaps so that you can become your own coach and make your own decisions. So let's just conclude it here. These watches are great. Like I said at the start of this video, I couldn't live without my smartwatch because of the information that gives me and how I'm able to interpret it. And it is a lot, and there is more information all of the time coming on these watches, these apps. But knowing how to interpret it is really, really crucial, and that's what I want to help you with. Don't just put your stock in this. I remember having conversations with people where they were telling me very confidently what their VO2 Max was, and I was thinking, you don't know your VO2 Max, I don't know mine. Yes, it's a guess, but don't worry about it. And it's the same, ultimately, I want you to find the joy of running or exercise. That's more important than being stat-driven, time-driven, race-driven, anything. It's just getting out there and loving it and learning. And like last week, if you want to see what me and Mary are up to daily, then we post everything that we do on Instagram, and we're also on Strava, Ben Bridges, Mary Bridges, if you want to see what we're up to and the actual statistics of our training sessions. Mary will share as much detail as she can, as will I, about what our sessions actually entail. All in the name of trying to help you maybe find a session that you like, or follow a structure that you like, or see how other people train. That's the aim of this, is to become a community of people that help each other to be better. Cheesy, I know, but I genuinely believe it. So I've given you a video on heart rate zones, I've given you a video on VO2 Max, I've told you about the podcast Fitness Freaks, by the way, where we talk to Dr. Neil Stanley about sleep. So all I'm going to do now is leave this to the YouTube algorithm to pick the video that it thinks you most want to watch. That is a subscribe button in case you want to join the journey and learn more on your way and become part of the community. And I'll see you on Sunday, where we'll be sharing our training for the week and how it's all going and all of the good stuff, and maybe even car chat. See you Sunday.